Okay, as we enter 1701, the roll-off was a 4 to a 1, which means that Charles has a pretty nice opportunity here to do something. Now, unfortunately, I've been away for a couple of days between dancing and then ending up at an after party and pretty much sleeping the next day, or resting mainly, a lot of reading. I'm a little lost as to what to do, but this is actually a big decision-making point too. I have to make my big strategic choice here. It's clear the Saxons, by building so many blocks here, and I can predict what I can out of that, have put themselves in a position I don't think they can cross Prussia or Hanover for that matter, so I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. I think there was an intention to kind of put pressure there, but that pressure doesn't really exist. Which means probably my best move is I got a couple good regiments here. If I can take the Danes out before they build up much more force, I think that's probably my best move. And try to count on the stuff here to hold off the Russians a little bit more than I have been. Because these Saxons were actually probably a huge mistake to build up. My thought had been, let's try to take out Swedes over here. But I don't have the movement capabilities for that. Probably going to have to spend effort to withdraw those guys. Now, another option, though, would be to enter Poland. If I do that, I free up a couple more Saxon blocks, though. Just regiments, but, well, Saxon-controlled blocks. And that may not be a great idea. So I'm kind of trying to avoid starting the Polish War for as long as I can. Entering Russia makes this more ugly if I end up losing any armies. So, given that there is a land route into Denmark, and I'm pretty safe here, I think that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to make my moves first. Mecklenburg can be passed through, so we'll pull these guys to Holstein-Gottorp. These guys can't cross quite yet. So for a second move, 1, 2, 3, we'll put the fleet here. And I can put 2 armies aboard that fleet if I understand sea transport correctly. Now, what's the limit? 1 army or 2 regiments per. So let's see what we got here. That's an army. All right, so let's just put my 2 army blocks aboard here. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3 of my moves. I got 1 more. I don't know what to do with that. What do we got here? Got 2 nice regiments. I kind of like them there because they're easier. I can transfer to the Russians. I think I've got enough force to hit here. I hate wasting on that, so I'm going to see if I got anything I can build up a point on. Otherwise, maybe I'll take a political action. Recouped a point over there that I hadn't built up, so now all the Swedish units are actually full, I think. The Russians, okay, so for the Allies, it was a hard call. Do I pull out of here? Well, these guys are kind of trying to tempt the Swedes to move in, get me some more blocks, because there aren't enough Saxon blocks. The Russians could go take and try to create St. Petersburg. The problem with that is that I don't really want Russian navies thrown into my pool right now. I'd rather be building armies up. I don't feel like a Russian navy is terribly useful at this point. Maybe if I had some Danish navies, but the Danes look like they're going to get crushed pretty quickly. The other option, go against a bigger stack. I'm within my forage limits, so I'm going to hit that instead. And it's all one force coming through. It does leave this open. How bad is that? I don't know. You know, you want to go into Russia? Go ahead. Right? Probably shouldn't have even stuck around for one round of combat. The Swedes took pretty heavy hits here. I'm in danger of losing an army, which would be bad. That would put me onto the attrition track. I'll probably withdraw rather than roll the dice. Problem is, I'm at the same firing moment as the Russians. So they're going to get 6 dice looking for 3s and 2s as I withdraw, and that's not good. Now, can I survive here? That's another question. 1 that covers these, so the answer is yes. Units were destroyed. No shooting back because I had to make the decision to withdraw at the same time. That cost me an attrition box, which means once I go into Russia, wow, I'm asking for it. The Russians don't get a siege attempt on this because I moved in and there was an army to protect it. But on their next activation, they will get one. Let's make sure I've done everything that's done in a turn. I checked for forage, I'm fine. I got two armies here, both of which have a supply thing, and 2 corps, which are regiments, which do not. So we're going to move into the summer. Take a little break, but it's a light enough game, it's fairly easy to get back into. You know, one thing, somebody else pointed this out too, these damn cardstock boards. I probably didn't try to flatten it as much as I could have, you know, but for a game that's, you know, not a several month thing, it's very hard for me to spend a couple of days trying to flatten it out before I play it. I assume if you play it regularly and flatten it out, it'll stay more flat, but this is pretty bad now. The wooden blocks, of course, are less affected than counters, but still, it's a pain in the butt. Summertime ended up a good turn from the Swedish point of view, but kind of a bone because they didn't get to act. Both sides rolled a 6, and so we got events. The Swedes got some additional replacement points, which allowed them to rebuild the lost units, and the coalition got an epidemic, which ended up hitting Denmark and hurting the units there. So now with a 3-1, oh shit, I haven't done the 1 yet. I did the 3. The Swedes are coming in here now. I'm coming from 2 different directions. One by sea, second out of Jylland, which means I'm not going to be coordinated for the first round of combat. I'm going to be rolling just one of those forces. I think I'll be taking this force, as it's quite capable actually. But now I have to decide what I'm doing with the coalition. These guys are pinned, they can't go anywhere. There's not much I can do about them. I think the best thing I can do is launch the siege there. For here, let's start this battle. And we open up with 4 dice at 2. Which causes 1 hit. That'll be on this unit. Now we've got 4 dice at 2 here versus looks like 2 Danish dice at 2. This is still first round. So they got 2 hits on us, and we only did 1 to them. That reduces the Danish army again. And now we go to the sea. Yeah. I'm just getting confused here by two people firing at once. The C is just one die at 2, which misses. Now, I got nowhere I can retreat to. The only land thing has forces coming through it. So these have now joined. We're not going to see any retreats or anything. And now we've got 3 5 dice at 2 as the opening round of combat. And that, I think, wipes the Danes out. Now, the Danes are without any troops on the board. I'm not sure when a truce occurs. But I'm not going to get a chance to siege the city. Now that shouldn't matter, but the truce is going to happen no matter what. And we're allowed to do a move right after the combat, the repositioning. If I can go to C, that would be useful. If I can't, we'll do what we can. I've successfully captured Estland. Now, the truce, any blocks of another nation under... I couldn't spread to C, as far as I can tell from the rules. It's not specifically excluding it, but it does state it in a way that seems like it's generating a positive. Let me see how it's worded, just so you can see. When a battle, the winning side may regroup at the instant of victory. A regroup is a special free move of any and all victorious blocks. Regrouping may move to any adjacent friendly or transit territories. Nothing about C. Although normally you could retreat to C. Yeah. Okay, but now the truce. A cube of the nation's colors 4 years ahead in the track. That'll be when it can start rolling again. But the other nations are moved to the nearest friendly territory they're allowed to enter. Now, allowed to enter is not well defined, nor is nearest. So, for example, I can move into Holstein-Gottorp with all of it, but is this closer, or is it as close? They're basically 2 spaces away. These guys have to go to Holstein-Gottorp, but they wouldn't have if I didn't retreat. I think everything does, and it doesn't really make much difference, does it? Well, it does, because my Holstein-Gottorp port is in the wrong place, and I'm not going to be able to move units without moving my fleet again in order to make up for what was lost. And we push into autumn. It's a regrouping turn in a lot of ways. The coalition built up forces here, moved some Saxons forward, moved some Russians forward, preparing for the assault against Livland here. The Swedes moved their boat and got on board. Now, they don't have a full-strength force here, but that's okay. They're down like 1 pip, I think, on one of their armies. We feel like we absolutely need to be in position for next season being able to land here. And everything's gathered for one massive battle up here in the Baltic. I guess the Swedes are probably going to center on this force and the Russians on this, but then we got reinforcements coming in. Couldn't get the Saxons into play, but the die rolls were too small. Partway through the battle, the Russians had a very good second round of the battle. After the reinforcements arrived, basically the Swedes didn't get many hits. We're about even in numbers now. The Swedes had some advantage before, but I mean, when you consider quality and numbers together, 6, I have 8 pips, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, but I get first strike. And the idea of running away, I mean, it sounds like a way to save Charles, but I don't know that it's absolutely necessary. We're at the end of the year. I'll be able to get some recouping. At the very least, some of my forces will be able to recover at Livland. The thing is, I can't lose my armies, but I only have 2 of them. I think I can survive this, so I'll keep going. But this is not the kind of attrition I want to be facing. I'm recording now and just realized I may have screwed something up. So these guys had to retreat into here. This guy, I think, came from the sea, which means he has to retreat back to sea, but I don't have a port, so I don't think I can. I don't know if he's allowed, I don't think he's allowed to retreat into an area he didn't move from, which would mean the destruction of another Swedish army. Of course, I can recover one of these guys. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah, because those were the guys who came from sea. Let me check that out. 2 interphase. And honestly, even with all the losses that happened, the Swedish army has pretty much recovered. Now, if we were down here, this would be painful. It says Swedish armies and Swedish regiments cost double, though. We had a question on that. Is that the first block only, or is that all replacements for those? I gotta look at that. I think it's all replacement points for a Swedish army, which kind of makes sense. And then they would significantly be reduced in value. Now, how I'm going to find it. I'll try to look. But so far, my decision has been that it's not, again, the rules to this have not been as heavily boiled down as a lot of GMT rules are. And I've gotten kind of used to being able to find my answers to things like that very easily in GMT rule books. Maybe it's hidden somewhere in there instead of bothering with the rules, though, which, yeah, screw that. I mean, the problem with hiding rules in the example of play is that it's absolutely impossible to find it. Even if you can find the answer, you basically have to read through the entire example of play to find out what it is. You can't just reference it from the rules. So if it's not in the rules, I'm going to be saying, well, any additions to army blocks will be doubled. Any additions will be doubled when we get to the regiments here. Anyway, having knocked the Danes out of the war, there's not that much production going on, which is kind of cool. I guess there's no real reason to leave these markers on the board once a country's out of the game. You could just use that marker over there, but again, it's not like their garrisons can be used either. But yeah, without the Danes in the war, it should be easier for us to face either the Russians or the Saxons alone. And the question is which direction we want to go in. We don't gain anything, I think, for taking these. There's some political effects to it, but we're not going to gain extra troops or anything like that. So I'm not really sure. There might be a rule that actually reduces the Saxon troops, though. Again, would be hard to find if it's there. So it may be time to move against the Russians, but there's real disadvantages to that. Among other things, we'd lose Hanover permanently if we move into Russia, and our Swedish armies would cost more. However, we've taken a penalty from the Ottomans. We're not going to see the Ottomans if we don't move into Russia. And then it becomes a question of, do you want to, make the attempt to bring them in, or do we just keep fighting in the Baltic and hope that we can destroy everything that's being thrown against us? The Russians got one of their annoying little armies off the map, or off the game track, so next turn they're going to have even more replacements. They'll be able to build additional units probably. One way or another, they will either get these things destroyed or be able to fix them and build additions. Oh, so yeah. It looks scary right now for the Swedes, and that leads me to think that maybe I need to try to get the Ukraine, get the Ottomans into it. Oh, I don't know if I checked. See, I went through all of these, but I forgot the Ukraine. I forgot all kinds of stuff here. Denmark can't, but Prussia is not able to because there's a -1. I think the Ukraine has a possibility of coming in, and I didn't roll for them. Okay. And Hanover I did check, and the others I checked. I just forgot to roll for the Ukraine. But yeah. So that's kind of the one hope of being able to do some damage to the Russians. That's just one block, though, and not very much in terms of power. Luckily enough for the Swedes, they got a good roll this time, 5 to only 1 for the coalition. That may be their sole saving grace here. This force here, though, is a danger. There's a larger Russian force that can still move in and attack us. I've got no reinforcements I can throw into place. What do I do with my 5 points? I have plenty of production. All my strength has been recovered. So it's kind of difficult to figure out what to do. One of the things is definitely to move some forces out to sea in preparation of a reinforcement. Assuming we can beat those Russians back, that will help. Beyond that, it's hard to figure out what to do with 5. I mean, I'm in a new year, so I can roll on the national politics table with one of those. If something bad comes up, I can recover from it. But I don't really know what else to do. I could move somewhere else. My army has a capability to move too. I could get away from the stronger Russian force. Maybe push down towards the south. That might be my safest move. I don't know. But again, that throws this down to here, which means Hanover will be permanently pro-coalition. I'm really not sure what to do. Swedes are going to lay siege to Smolensk. The 1 point for the Russians. What do I do with it? I think because this puts the Swedes close to Moscow, which could drive the Russians out of the game, we actually have to pull back to Novgorod. I got 2 armies here, and the other 2 are regiments, I believe, so hard to tell. But that's my assumption since I was okay there. So I've fallen back. That at least puts Moscow in my range. And then all we have to do is the siege here, which, okay. Lots of dice at A. 4 dice at A3. Yeah, Charles is awesome. And 5 dice at A2. Use these reds. But I gotta get 2 hits, and that goes to 4 for Moscow, so I get the 2 hits, which drops this down, and we get a cube there. Now the net effect, the Russians came down. They're going to fight at Smolensk because they pinned these. So they can't go further into Moscow or whatever. A roll for whether or not, I've already done the national politics table anyway, so I can't do it again for the Swedes. The Russians tried it, got them this unit. Otherwise, we've gathered up together here at Livland, but that means that Estland has been sieged as well, so yeah, we'll have a lot of interesting stuff going on there. Things worked out pretty well for the Swedes, to tell you the truth. The attack on Smolensk was almost a complete failure. You can see I got a hit against Charles there, and that's about it. Otherwise, the Russians withdrew in the second round back to Moscow, giving themselves a little bit more defensive capability. These guys can't recuperate. Well, yeah, they can. They can go through transit areas. But where's a port that they control? They control Riga. And the reason for that is, I forgot, you can't combine two nationalities to take something. Since the most of the armies there were Saxon, I decided to make the attack with the Saxons. They didn't manage to overcome Riga, took a hit instead. However, Estonia up here fell, which of course ups the value of the Swedish production because they've regained one of their home areas. And we're going into August. Things look better for the Swedes. I think I may be making some rules mistakes. That would not be unlikely for me. But I think I'm making a lot of strategic and tactical blunders in playing this. This is a game that requires a good deal more thought than it would seem just as a block game, you know. But block games often require a decent amount of thought. But what I'm thinking is just the incorporation of all the different possibilities and interactions that come out of the rulebook create a deeper situation than is normal for block games, I think. Swedes got something they did not want to have happen, which is an event. It means no actions for them. The coalition's going to get to operate freely. The result was attrition. All blocks on the map not in their national territory lose a step. No. We got a 4. Not in friendly territory. Okay, the distinguishment between those two. First I saw friendly territory, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. But with looking at those two events in sequence, now it seems pretty clear. So friendly territory is going to be friendly controlled, and this is friendly controlled, this is friendly controlled. The only thing that's not is this. Assuming, yeah, there's nothing actually at sea anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. So the forces gathered in Livonia are going to take a hit. And blunders, the Russians hurt themselves up here badly, and now we go to one more. This is the winter phase. Now let's see. If the Swedes get even just one action, they can make a move on Moscow. I don't know if I have enough dice to take Moscow, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah, I got enough dice. No, I have enough dice for actions. I don't know if I have enough dice for the armies. Because I don't have a path going back home that I can use right now to resupply myself and get more pips. This battle's getting ugly. The Swedes marched up into Livland. They did some other repositioning type moves as well. They might have been able to get reinforcements when they went into Livland. Because the way the reinforcements are written, I think you can march and then gain them after you join battle, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. And maybe if not, I cheated. 8.3. Yeah. Yeah. So there doesn't seem to be a limit to what you can do with actions, which means unless pinning affects this, they can't move. Yeah. So I think actually the Swedes could have reinforced themselves, and that would have been a good move. I didn't feel the need to because we've got a lot of points here. We don't have a lot of troops we need to recover. But now we're in a situation in, geez, I think this is the third round of combat, where I can either withdraw to Velikaya, which if this siege succeeds, I'll at least be in supply and can use replacement points to recover. And that's probably my best move. Or take a chance at losing Charles. Now, if I get anything, if I get a couple of hits, Peter's going to be down to 1 strength, and he might not want to stick around. But I don't feel like I can chance that I'll be able to get 2 hits here. Even 1 drops him down to 1 strength, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to pull out with my 1s back into the space I came from, and that leaves Livland in Russian coalition hands. Now, they couldn't do a siege because they were pinned, so now we do the siege upper at whatever, Ingermanland. And we'll be rolling a bunch of dice and probably taking that back, which will actually recover all our production points, which means we can probably pretty much recover that force without too much expense. And as we enter 1703's interphase, just wondering, since it was 1703, I could have actually put another block, one of the better blocks in for the Russians, and I wish I had done that. But I am a little worried about Russia just getting knocked out of the war at this point. So I built up the forces in Moscow, as well as Peter over here. Both of those are dangers to knocking the Russians out of the war permanently. Well, not permanently, but for a while. Losing Peter would be horrible because then I lose one of my good armies as well. The Saxons, I noticed I had accidentally had these guys up here. I think they had fallen. I think I thought they had fallen over and put them in there, but maybe I paid for them at some point. They can't be on the map yet. They're my Polish units. The Ottomans have entered the war. Now, they're not allowed outside of Ukraine and Poland. And if they go into Poland, that causes problems. Hanover defects because this is in the Russian side of things. I forgot that Swedish armies cost double and probably have to... No, I didn't spend very much. I'll recalculate it, but I think I'm okay. They didn't take a lot of losses except on those guys. Now, those guys are going to be expensive, though. So each pip on the army would normally cost 2 doubled for being outside of a garrison, brings it to 4. They should be 8 each, actually. So I may not be able to build that unit, and I may not be able to fully reinforce. And Prussia came into play. Now, Prussia doesn't mean a hell of a lot when there's this many Swedes sitting there, but between them and the Saxons, they may be able to do something, depending on, at least tie down some of the Swedish moves to try to take them out of the way. Prussia can only do one thing, though. Prussia can only try to take Pomerania. There's a whole bunch of Swedes there, right? It's springtime here in 1703, and both sides rolled a 2. Since the Swedes had to go first last time, the coalition had to go first this time. We moved a bunch of Saxons up here to help protect Prussia and possibly launch an attack, And I don't remember what else. Oh, we moved Saxons down here to threaten the Ottomans. Well, if they're going to waste actions on the Ottomans, no reason to bring them out, right? Just leave them there, build up, whatever. The Swedes then launched a double attack into Livland and managed to drive Peter and the Saxons back. They had to retreat into Poland. There's no other real options. And we're kind of in the position of, well, at some point or another, we can't just let Poland be a safe place for Allied armies to be. I think Russians are allowed in Poland, I hope. I know They weren't always, but like historically at this point in the war, they wouldn't have been able to enter Poland, supposedly, but the game doesn't seem to account for that. So that pushes us into the summer. An uneventful summer, a 1 and a 2 die roll. Got a 6 and a 3 now. Uneventful, we just increased some strength points back. The unfortunate thing is the 6 ended up getting onto the Swedish event table. Emperor demands troops. Saxony has to remove one of their units from their replacement pool. Well, they had one in there, and it was pretty good. And that's out until either Sweden invades Saxony or captures both the Polish capitals. A good reason not to focus too hard on the Saxons at this point. So we may continue with working on the Russians, especially since this isn't too big a deal. The Swedish army is costing double. That could be a problem. We really don't want an attrition war at this point. Figure out what to do with those 3 Russian points, though. The Saxon army was just destroyed in Prussia, or in Pomerania, actually. And that included Augustus, which means we got some problems there. So we got 2 problems. It looks to me like both the Prussians and the Saxons are going to be knocked out of the war. The Saxons because Augustus was defeated, and the Prussians because they will have no more pieces on the board. Both these things will free up the Swedes to attack Russia with full force at the end of this year. That's pretty harsh now. I don't know if Russia can survive that. No, actually, the peace happens immediately. So I guess the Russian bloc goes, or the Prussian bloc. I was checking, hey, what happens if the Swedes roll another 6 in a row? Do they re-roll? What happens? This means Prussia will normally not. I don't know what happens if they're knocked out. Let's see if we can find the roll here. Truce. Okay, there's no cube of that nation's color. The only thing I can think of is you should use this, 2, 3, 4. And the Saxons will also be knocked out. Now let's look at the rules on the Saxons. All of their blocks are returned. All of their garrison markers. What was the restriction on if I invade Saxony or if both Polish capitals go? Okay, all the garrison markers go from captured territories. Now the question is whether Warsaw and Krakow are captured. I'm not really sure of the answer of that. Augustus is out of the game. I hope I didn't bump this so that it's not facing somewhere. There are Russians in Poland, which there should be, that's fine. A lot of special roles in here that I gotta cope with. So yeah, the only real question remaining is, are these cubes in a captured territory? Because there's nothing else, there's nowhere where the Swedes are in Saxon territory or the Saxons are anywhere else. This is the only place. What I forgot to mention, the Russians attempted a siege here. They failed, took a hit on their main army, which is the only thing that could actually siege. And Russia's in a lot of trouble here. I've got Peter, I've got an army here and 3 regiments. Okay, so I've got to try to find out, and I don't know even where to look in the rules. There aren't a lot of rules, but they're also don't seem to cover all the cases very well. Okay, as far as I can tell, these are conquests, essentially. They're gone. Them being gone means that Saxony loses some of their replacement points. If and when they come back in the game, it may be over by then. No. There's not a lot of Russians to hold off that Swedish horde. All right, and we go into the winter, and of course, Charles could take a winter move after this if he doesn't manage to capture Moscow this turn. It's close enough that that may happen. Let's march into Smolensk. This is a kind of dangerous thing to do, but they almost kill Peter, which would have been great, and he withdraws. That would have been the end of the game at that point, with all the coalition knocked out. I don't want to do a winter move. Well, actually I do, because I could kill Peter. If he withdrew anywhere other than, I mean, he could withdraw into all kind of places, but if he withdraws into Moscow, the one valuable place, then he's overstacked and dead, I think. No, because he's got an army supply. Okay, so he could safely withdraw here. That's important because otherwise Charles chases him down and finishes him off if he gets one hit and his aim quality units are able to strike first. That puts it on the Swedes still to make an option. They choose not to. Remember, the Russians have a real problem here in terms of building up more forces. Additionally, we got problems with the Swedes and possible coalition allies coming in. Not much there, though. Hanover could come in, I guess. 1704 interphase sees Russia with greater problems as the Ukraine rises up. That takes away 8 of their production. You know, it's 4 areas. They've got nothing else on the track. They're not choosing to try to build, you know, better units at this point still. We're in real trouble. And we bulked up as much as we could. We actually got an extra regiment back here, which might be useful, might not. We're very worried. A couple of things that could go wrong. One is a defeat at Moscow, which could capture it. Or Peter could end up dying in such a battle. Or it's not that many more areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that have to fall for the Russians to surrender just due to territories being taken from them. So they can't just put everything here. They can for a little while, and maybe the Danes will come save their bacon or something, but eventually the Swedes will conquer all of the territory that they need to, and so the Russians have to actually be active in their defense, probably. The Danes probably aren't powerful enough to be able to swing that easily, and certainly if Russia's knocked out, the Danes won't be able to handle it alone, and probably the Danes and some freshly grown Saxons won't be able to handle it alone. There's just not, you know, there's not the time to build up an army. When a force first comes in, it doesn't usually have, you know, it has whatever it produces here, and that's not very much, especially with the Saxons losing Poland now. Low rolls for both players. The Swedes combine, get themselves a siege at Velikaya, and take it. The Russians say, hey, let's take Smolensk back. Well, not quite. And that's bad because I've uncovered Moscow. Now, is that terrible? Probably not. I can probably move my army back into Moscow, but what if I get a 6? What if the game's over because I get a stupid 6, right? You know? But I can't just let the Swedes take whatever they can. I've gotta try to protect what little replacements I have left. The little dance begins in the summer. Swedes move in, take Novgorod. Russians take Smolensk back. Now, Smolensk is easier to take. Novgorod was a 3-pointer. We're trying to push our way so that we can, you know, with the right moves, be able to get increments. The Ottomans are moving up. I got 2 more armies moving into place here. We should be able to start sieging more and more more territories than the Russians can take back safely, except for one little thing. I'm wrong. The Turks can't go into Russia. They can stay in the Ukraine, and that's it. Sweden, it's got the lower role this time. The Russians had to go cover Moscow. They went for Rizhev. They didn't get it this time. In the winter, the Russians got an event. Bad weather. 2 steps off everything in Russia and the Ukraine that's not Russian or Ukrainians. So the Turks got hosed here. The Swedes also. Swedes pulled back so that they can buy back strength points more easily, because this is not pleasant. And I didn't have the strength to take Smolensk. I probably would have chanced things and marched out and taken Ladoga, but for that 1 forage value, I've got 2 armies that would have to go in there. That's just not going to happen. So, Charles is not doing a winter campaign after that. And we go to another interphase. And oh look, the Danes are back. Maybe. But they got a +1 on it, so it's a fair chance. To 1705, the Russians are feeling a little better. No new additions. I thought the Hanoverians came in, but no, because the Swedes had left Russia. They can have those garrisons, I believe, and not be penalized. I'll check that and make sure. But so because we're feeling a little better, we're starting to upgrade some of our armies, and we've got a decent replacement pool here. The Swedes, they have their whole army, but so what, right? They had their whole army before, They have plenty of replacement points. The only real question is whether that thing can keep operating, enough to take Russia down. More Ottoman troops. Yay. One of them special cases where the game is not going to, where the mechanical tools that I'm using to help me track the game aren't going to help me recall the situation. They're all double deuces here. The Russians had a 6 over on their actions. If you get doubles, the order of play switches. Whoever had to go first last time goes first this time. I don't think it covers what happens when only one person went. Did the 6 go first because the event was rolled beforehand, or is the other person the first? I'm putting it as the 6 was such a penalty. Getting an event is a bad thing in general. That I'm going to allow the Russian or the coalition to go second this time. But, it's just kind of making up parts of the rules as you go. I highly doubt that they cover it, and I'm not really all that interested in hunting it down. I don't feel like it affects the game that much. Time activation, the Swedes push into Ryazan, and yeah, I know it's Rizhev here. I'm used to Ryazan, whatever. And the Russians destroy the Ukrainian revolt, which I guess just incorporates all this land back into Russia. Sent some regiments down to do the dirty job, and they were capable of handling it. But that gets me 2 spaces back, 8 points back, but I lost 4 for another province falling. Swedes take Tver. Russian forces defeated over here in Smolensk. However, the Russians had a big die roll. It didn't help them. They don't have much to do. They don't have many onboard units to build. They don't have any allies. They did a national politics thing. This is the one they can do per year. Denmark's coming in, but it doesn't come in until the next interphase. It would be really cool if they came in now. That would be able to really affect things. But could have even acted in this turn. Passes, the Russians and Swedes playing ping pong, the Swedes taking Smolensk, the Russians taking Ryazan back. Moscow's open, not a big deal. I can move my army back there. Of course, I become the attacker if I end up moving in after, but that's okay. Swedish fleet blockading Denmark, trying to prevent them from doing anything too exciting. The Swedes have gathered their entire army here. The Russians have 3 points to, well, as much as they could get there. They did move this, and the Turks are besieging Poltava. If Moscow falls before the Danes come into the game, it's over though. So we pretty much have to throw the Russian army in as well. And I think that's probably, trying to see if this stack's worth sending in. Yeah, so that's going to be all 3 points. I'm just going to be sweeping in with everything. With 4 8 blocks, I'll end up preventing a siege. It's possible I could go with less blocks, but the winner gets to spread out. The only problem is the first round of combat, I'm going to be coming in from multiple forces, and I may not be able to hold things off. So it's important that I pin all their units. If I ended up leaving like 2 units unpinned, the Swedes might be able to keep 2 good armies out and maybe take Moscow. I think they're better off fighting with their big units. The rules as to what happens when you're pinned, if you recall when I went over the rules, could the Swedes use their entire army if they're only part of it's pinned, supposedly? Could they fight the whole battle and not have the siege that they declared? Or do they have to leave some forces on siege? And if they have to leave forces on siege, what does that kind of do? If I'm pinning all of these guys, though, they all have to fight. And I might be able to create some kind of weird situation where there's an advantage for the Russians not to send everything in. Like, probably not 4 units, but if I sent 6 units in, 2 units is not enough to win the siege. So then the Swedes would be without 2 of their probably better blocks, and certainly better than these weaker blocks. Maybe, and if that's the case, what do I want to do? Do I just want to do a reinforcement? Because I think that's actually what the rule seems to imply, is that, yeah, I have to have that siege. I declared a siege there. I actually cannot not prosecute it. But then comes the question of, well, can I be prosecuting it with a couple of regiments? Or am I going to be forced to use armies to besiege the territory? And it's just this whole sequence of questions that seems to come from it. And the easiest thing, quite frankly, is to just send everything in and, say, well, I don't want to untangle that roll. That big Russian army got chewed up. Peter escaped with 1 strength point. It's time for a winter campaign. Charles is going to activate all of his forces and march in. And everything just gets dropped by 1. We got to be careful because of the rotation. Because if we get just a single hit, we win the game. Because the Danes aren't in yet. And Peter's defeated. There are no allied major nations. In fact, there's no coalition nations at all. It's over. I was given the impression from the players' notes that it's pretty hard to beat Sweden in an automatic victory, but it would be even harder to beat the coalition one. It doesn't feel that way. Like, it felt to me, the way it was described, well, you can just kind of outweight Sweden, let them beat you all over the place. Eventually they'll screw something up, either a die roll or make some strategic errors or whatever, and you'll be able to win, or at least win some battles. The tide will begin to turn. Well, it felt like the tide was turning, to tell you the truth. This should have been here. I counted this in on the Danes, but anyway, it felt like the tide was already turned. somewhat against the Swedes. It felt like things were going to change, and no, they didn't really. Now, obviously, I didn't get my decent Russian armies in at all, but it's still early in the game. You may not draw them if you put them in your force pool. There's a lot of Russian armies to build, or a lot of Russian troops to build. There's a lot of randomness as to what you get as the coalition. That may have interfered in it somewhat. Other things, man, that Swedish army is damn good. If you don't cover Moscow, it can take Moscow. If you do cover it, it can beat up a Russian army that's fairly strong pretty quickly. And then if Peter's around, boom, it's over. The winter campaign certainly helped. That meant no die roll to see who got to move first or whatever, because otherwise maybe Peter could run away, although forced marching would have been risky, because if he loses his last strength point, it's over then. And, whatever. But yeah, it definitely was not the impression I got from reading the rules. Now, how historically accurate is this? It gives some flavor. There's no question of that. It would be very hard to make a game. Here's part of the problem: is Charles's goals seem so nebulous at times. In the reality, it's hard to get a grasp on what they are, and in a sense, this game kind of provokes that nicely. Like, yeah, I'll just wander down into the Ukraine, see if I can get some Turks to join me. Oh shit, I'm out of supply. Wow, that sucks. I guess I'll try to wander home. Oh, that looks dangerous. That kind of flavor, and I like when a game captures that kind of feel. The coalition doesn't have that kind of problem for the most part that I can see. Although there is a lot of flexibility as to where you want to deploy your troops, etc. So it's kind of interesting. Definitely want to give this another shot. Anyway, I'll load the playthrough up, come back with a review where I'll try to recap my thinking on it.